This is the most broken strategy I have ever seen in Rogue Legends. Every one of my towers has near global range, insane attack speed, and only gets better as the game goes on. Here is how I did it. It all revolves around Dreadbloon. He was my stage 1 boss. Before him, I was struggling, nothing was going for me, and by the time I beat Dread, I only had 1 life left and basically no good synergies. But popping him gave me the Essence of Dreadbloon, a legendary artifact that makes monkeys count as every category. So if we get an artifact that makes military monkeys shoot faster, primary, magic, and support monkeys will get that buff as well. At first, I wasn't too excited because I didn't really have any artifacts that went with it, but I figured the temporary boosts you get mid-fight could stack up and make the next stage easier. Plus, my only other options were some tier 5 monkeys I'd never be able to afford. So we hopped into stage 2, healed up a bit at the first campfire, and started our journey. My only goal was to stack as many of these category buffs as we could. This started off slow, as the first few fights end so soon, but after a couple maps, we found some artifacts, 2 of which were Cold Steel and Primary Specialist. The first gives tier 3 military monkeys or higher a 15% chance to freeze bloons, and the other makes primary monkeys reload 35% faster, but cuts the pierce of other monkey categories by 15%. I was a bit worried that this would make every monkey get both the attack speed buff and the pierce nerf, but even if that's the case, it's well worth the trade-off. These two let us defend very easily, not leaking at all even on Rake. The extra attack speed let our Moab presses stall Bloom super well, and our Necromancer was destroying Bloon rushes with this freeze. But then we took on a Bloonarius boss rush. I was aiming for the rare artifact, but I was in for a surprise. We put down a super monkey, chose the temporary support monkey damage, and saw the power of our buffs. The moment Bloonarius got in his range, he melted his health bar. This caught me off guard, but the plan was simple. Place or upgrade super monkeys constantly, pick up the best temporary boost possible, and use our other monkeys to defend the rounds. And this worked perfectly. By the end, we had an army of bat monkeys attacking Bloonarius and a couple necromancers popping the balloons. And even with just these artifacts, we were able to crush the score needed for the top prize. And what did we get from this dumpstering of a boss rush? Heightened Perception, an artifact that increases the attack range of primary monkeys by 75%. It does cut our projectile speed by half, but that's easily made up with the boosts you get mid-fight. Right away, we could see the benefit of this. Our crossbow could see all of Adora's temple, and our necromancer could now fill his graveyard from across the map, so we never had to worry about him running out of balloons. Now, this makes us pretty strong at the start of fights, but once the temporary boosts start stacking up, we get pretty crazy. A single Moab press can handle the blimps, and a necromancer could pop basically everything else, leaving us with plenty of money to spend however we wish. As we got later into the stage, this moved more and more into super monkeys as they had camo detection and crazy attack speed. I mean, unencrypted, we opened with one and the sheer amount of darts it threw per second was mind-boggling. And all we had to do was back it up with an AMD Alchemist to be able to pop every type of balloon. What was more impressive though was our next challenge tile was beating Haunted with $23,300 or less. And we had to deal with a surprising amount of DDTs and ZOMGs by the end, but we cleared this mark by a whopping $25, and beating it gave us the Support Specialist artifact, which reduces all of our monkeys' attack cooldowns by 35% again. Now, I'm not sure if this is additive or multiplicative, but either way, it got pretty strong. And here is where it wasn't even fair. The next fight was on middle of the road, and we kept the balloons at the entrance for basically the entire fight. But we had a few more things to gather before we took on Vortex. The first was a tack shooter artifact that adds a 0-2-0 tack to our party, gives it double range, bouncing tacks, and double projectile lifespan. This doesn't buff any other monkey, but oh boy, does this thing have some range and attack speed from all the other category buffs. I put one down in our next fight, and the tack shooter could see almost all of town center. While not the best as a 0-2-0, the second we made him a ring of fire, his damage took off. It was funny because the attack animation only went a little ways, but he was dealing damage across the screen. And by the 30s, we had enough temporary buffs on the tack shooter that he could see the entire map. The only thing that would have made him better is if he could see over obstacles. But after town center, we only had one more fight and a shop before Vortex. So we did the same old thing on Resort. Had a Necromancer decamo everything, permastalled the blimps with some Moab presses, had insane damage with a couple Batmen, and got 2 global rings of fire just for fun. It was so easy, I was messing around this entire fight, but then a bad came on round 47. The one blimp we can't really stall. But we shredded that outer layer real quick and cleaned up the inside shortly after. And this let us stop by Geraldo's shop with 23 tokens to spend. And the two artifacts of note that we picked up were the Enchanted Rebuttal, which lets magic monkeys push back bloons with every hit, and the Unspoken Heroes, which lets support monkeys have a 1 in 10 chance to crit for 250% damage. But it reduces our hero's attack speed and end of round experience by 15%. But because Quincy is our only monkey that doesn't receive all the buffs, we haven't been using him anyway, so that's a trade-off I'm happy to make. So we headed into Vortex without a fear in the world. Our insane range is the perfect counter to him, as we should be able to damage Vortex well outside of his stun radius, and this was 100% correct. We set up our defenses in the middle of the map and slowly whittled him down. Honestly, it would have been a super fast fight had I put the super monkey farther forward. With every skull, we knocked Vortex back to the beginning of the map, and we had to wait for him to come back in range, which is crazy since we can see most of the map. But because of this, most of our time was spent popping the normal rounds, and anytime Vortex peeked out, we sent him packing. But on round 36, we popped the last skull and beat stage 2. Unfortunately, none of the rewards stacked too well with our setup, so we took the Essence of Vortex. This lets tier 5 monkeys and level 20 heroes knock back Moab class balloons and have a 10% chance to blow back regular ones. Not that useful right now, as we don't have any tier 5s, but I could see that coming in clutch in stages 4 or 5. But this strategy is so strong that we were able to get legendary rewards on several tiles before it even ramped up, popped a bad in just a couple seconds, and beat Vortex so easily that he barely made it out of the spawn. And we still have 3 more stages to go, giving us plenty of time to snowball. This was basically just one stage of artifacts, and there are way more that we can collect to make our monkeys even better. So if you faced Dreadbloon early on in your campaign, I highly recommend building this way.